Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm CJ Epps, the Director of the Office of External Affairs here at the Economic Development Administration. The purpose of today's webinar is to share information with you about EDA's Distressed Area Recompete pilot program, Phase 1 Notice of Funding Opportunity, which we released on June 29th of this year. Before we begin, we'll have a brief intro video from the Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Economic Development, Alejandra Castillo.
Hello, I'm Assistant Secretary Alejandra Castillo, and it's my honor to oversee the U.S. Economic Development Administration. I'm thrilled to announce that we are calling for applications to our new Recompete pilot program. This program reinforces the administration's commitment that no one and no section of our nation is left out of economic progress. Think about the great former industrial cities, underserved rural small towns, or other distressed communities in your state that deserve a second chance at economic greatness, and whose economies would thrive if there were more opportunities for employment. The Recompete pilot program specifically invests in areas with low prime age employment to help spur a new chapter of opportunity in the region's story. We've put together a series of comprehensive materials on our website to help you prepare an application. In the webinar ahead, you will hear from our program leaders about how best to prepare successful responses for our Notice of Funding Opportunity, also called NOFOs. Listen carefully to their guidance and best practices, and please reach out to our team if you have any questions. You can find contact information and the latest resources at eda.gov. I wish you the best in your work ahead responding to this and future NOFOs. It is you working in your communities to make them stronger every day that help us at EDA keep investing in America. Thank you.
And thank you for that message from Assistant Secretary Castillo. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping rules. The slides that will be shown today will be on our website, eda.gov, next week. Also, currently on our website are detailed frequently asked questions and an English and Spanish fact sheet with additional program information as well as eligibility information. During today's webinar, we will not take live questions, but ask that you put your questions in the chat, and which we will answer during the Q&A portion toward the end. We will do our best to address your questions during today's webinar, but if for whatever reason we run out of time, we aren't able to address your questions, there are frequently asked questions that are frequently updated on our website at eda.gov. Or if you have additional follow-ups, following today's session, they can be sent to recompete@eda.gov. I'll now turn it over to our Recompete pilot program lead, Scott Endis. Scott?
Thanks, CJ. I appreciate it, and welcome everyone. We're thrilled to have this conversation about our Recompete pilot program, which we think is a really incredible opportunity for some of the most distressed communities in America. So without any further ado, let me kick off the presentation and we'll talk through the Phase 1 NOFO. All righty. So I'm going to do three things throughout this presentation. First, I'm going to walk through the program vision. Why does this program exist? What are we trying to accomplish with it? And what is really our North Star here at EDA as we think about the program? Second, I want to outline the eligibility criteria because there's some important statutory elements in here that are reflected in the NOFO that will be critical for you to understand. And then finally, most importantly, want to lay out the program structure, the timelines, and perhaps most importantly, the evaluation criteria that you'll, of course, find in the NOFO, and a number of other elements. And then I'll do that for about 25 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions. So first of all, what's the point of this program? The bottom line and the fundamental point of this program is that There are far too many places in this country that have been distressed and have been forgotten and underinvested in for too long. So this $200 million pilot program will provide significant flexible resources to those communities. The key sort of statistical element that we use in this program is the prime age employment gap. So eligibility, and we'll talk about this in a moment, is really based on those areas that have a significant trail the national average in prime age employment. As I said, the funding will be large. There will be both planning grants as well as large implementation dollars. And like a number of our national programs, this will be a two-phase company. Taking things one step further, we have a number of principles that really motivate and sort of amplify everything we do, from how we design the phase one NOFO all the way through how we're thinking about evaluation and ultimately making these awards. So what I'll say is, first, the most important thing is this is a jobs program. This is a jobs program. It is meant to invest in communities and create pathways to good jobs across the eligible community. Second, we see this as a fundamentally place-based competition. And what we mean by that is, one, we mean the sort of geographic footprint really matters, and we'll talk about that. But also, more importantly, perhaps, we at EDA have a fundamental belief that local community leaders, public, private, philanthropic, civic, and labor, all are best positioned to know what their communities need. And so a critical element of this competition is flexible awards to allow those communities, your communities, to dictate your strategy and what you need. Third, this competition, unlike, so I ran the Build Back Better Regional Challenge, which was for all communities. And obviously we now have our Tech Hubs program, which is for those communities with technology-based strategies. This program is for a specific type of place, and those are some of the most distressed places in the country. We think too often those places are not. We don't have enough flexible programs for those places. So this is really meant to be for places that might look like a handful of neighborhoods that are highly distressed in an otherwise fairly well-off city, that may constitute a tribal community, that may constitute rural or remote areas, and everything in between. But it really is for those places that have experienced significant distress. And finally, equity is EDA's #1 investment criteria. It is a through line of this entire competition, and it touches everything that we do. And part of that is we also will have ultimately a portfolio investments that we really hope look like distress in America, that really do touch on the different types of communities that are experiencing joblessness in this country. So just to give you a sense of where how we got here. So originally Congress authorized this program at a $1 billion for the full life of its program, and we've been appropriated $200 million for a pilot program. We fully anticipate running and executing this program in such a way to signal the long-term critical value of programs like this, and how this program, if fully funded, can be executed for years to come with future cohorts. So let's dive into eligibility criteria. So the first eligibility criteria is recipient type. So this should be fairly standard for those of you who've worked with EDA. This looks like most of our list of eligible criteria. One note I'll say is, unlike the Build Back Better Regional Challenge and the Tech Hubs program, is this program does not require consortia. We expect some coalitions to come together as applicants, and we expect some individual organizations to submit applications. Both of those are appropriate and fine. We don't have a bias. What we ask for is that the applicant be able to execute on the grant and execute on their vision for their community. Where things get a little more complicated in this program is around eligible area. So we have some fairly strict eligibility requirements outlined in our statute. And so we've worked quite hard with Argonne National Lab over the last several months to build out an eligible mapping tool. Please, please, please do look at this. Reach out to us, and I'll provide those contact information at the end of the presentation. If you have any questions about this, We really did try to make this as user-friendly as potentially possible for the program. So what does that map look like? So first, before we get into the map, let's talk a little bit about some definitional elements that are in the NOFO. So first, you'll see what we refer to as eligible service areas. This is simply what it appears on that map, the full area that is eligible to participate in this competition. You'll also see conversations around service area. And what the service area really is that may be a subunit of the eligible geography. For example, you may have a large region, rural region, the whole region qualifies, but you want to focus on a particular town in that region. That's perfectly acceptable. We recognize in many situations, the service area where EDA's investments will actually come to ground and the benefits accrued will likely be in areas that are smaller than the eligible area. The only hard and ready fact is all of EDA's investments and the service area must be within an eligible area. So you cannot invest EDA's resources or accrue benefits outside of eligible. So this slide's going to look a little confusing, but I promise once you look at the map, it'll make a lot more sense. So we've got two, and we'll talk about these in a second. We've got two types of eligible areas: local labor market, defined by a metropolitan statistical area or micropolitan statistical area, commuting zone or tribal area. Essentially, if your region or where you live or where you want to do work is yellow or green, you qualify under the local labor market. If it is gray, your local labor market does not qualify. Now we have a second one called local communities, and this is a general purpose unit of local government, county, municipality, city, those types of things. And the important feature is those areas must be within an ineligible local labor market. Again, putting that all aside, if you're dark blue, your entire local area of government, the county, the city, qualifies. If you're light blue, that means a subset of census tracts are eligible. And you'll have to click through to the further on the map, and you can zoom right in. You don't need to know your census tract numbers. You can zoom into the street level, but that will indicate if you're light blue, only a subsection of your city, county, or municipality qualifies. Please do look at that map. Please do reach out to us with questions. So why are the notion of local communities and local labor markets outlined in the statute and in the NOFO? So the sort of theory of the case behind these is that, and again, these are sort of high-level typologies. I will say every community looks different, so no one's going to clearly fall into one or the other. But the theory of the case here is local labor markets that lack access to jobs. So first, the local labor market is just sort of defined as one or more counties that account for most of the commuting patterns. So people can move around and to jobs around in these areas. But often these are more rural areas, sometimes more remote. And the theory of the case is there just simply aren't enough jobs in many of these local labor markets. So the interventions look a particular way where they need to create new jobs. That's slightly different than often what can be found in local communities. And what a local community, this is often an eligible area in a local community, might be a smaller neighborhood, might be a series of neighborhoods, as I said, in an otherwise fairly well-off city. Might be a county within a larger, fairly well-off labor market. But here, often what you'll find is residents are actually in proximity to existing jobs, but they simply haven't been connected to those jobs, training. So here you might have a different suite of investments and interventions to really connect people to those existing jobs. And look, this is the distinction here is a general typology. Each community is going to look different, and everyone should create their own strategy. We just wanted to underline sort of some of the thinking behind some of these distinctions. You'll notice in the NOFO, and please do visit our website, the Recompete's website. We are adding supplemental material all the time, but you can see that through these, I won't go through each one of these, but whether you're creating jobs or connecting workers to existing jobs, you're likely going to have a suite of investments, right? That really where the sum is greater than the whole is greater than the sum of the part. And so we just ask you think about what are the types of mix of interventions. And one of the things we're really going to be looking for is, do these different programs and investments that EDA makes, do they connect together, or are they sort of distributed and sort of one-offs? So that's a really important piece of this competition, as it is most of our large national. All right, so let's dive into the program structure, which is really sort of the meat of the presentation here, and then I want to make sure we have time for questions. So this, as I said, this is a two-phase competition. So phase one, we just opened. It'll close October 5th. Here, I'll talk about these in the next slide. We'll be making strategy development grants. Those are planning grants between $500,000 and sometimes up to as much as $750,000. We estimate we'll spend about $6 to $12 million on those. Two, we will approve recompete plans. This is the gate to be invited to apply to phase two competition. Again, here we expect to make at least 20 of these approvals. And then three, there'll be a number of applicants that seek and receive. Then we'll release our second NOFO. We'll launch that in the winter. And we will ultimately envision making 4 to 8 large awards. These are between $20 and $50 million, so significant sized awards to 4 to 8 of those 20 plus finalists. So let's unpack this just a little bit more. So again, there's these 3 lanes any given applicant can take. Lane 1 is you say, look, we think our region has a lot of potential. We just don't think we're quite there in our planning process to apply for those large implementation dollars. So we'd like to apply for a strategy development grant only and use those resources maybe to hire some staff, maybe to get our planning in order. And then in future iterations of this competition, we hope to be better prepared for those large implementation dollars. So that's sort of lane 1. Lane 2 is communities that say kind of the opposite. We feel quite comfortable in our current stage of planning, or we have potential sources of resources such that we feel comfortable resourcing our planning stages. So we are only going to apply for approval of our recompete plan. Now, remember, no resources come with having your plan approved, but that allows, if your plan is approved in this year, that enables you into the second phase of the competition for those large implementation dollars. And then, as I said, we suspect a non-trivial share of applicants will actually seek both. So I want to just outline and level set. There is no gaming of this. Taking one of these 3 routes is not more strategic or going to make your application more competitive than any other. These are going to be looked at independently. We just ask what makes sense for your region, what makes sense for your priorities, and just do that. Don't overthink it. So let's get into kind of the meat and potatoes of the presentation. I want to talk about the evaluation criteria. We have 2 buckets of evaluation criteria, those for those planning grants and those for those recompete plans. So the evaluation criteria for the planning grants we think are pretty clear. There are 4 of them. All 4 criteria are weighted equally. The first one is an assessment of regional conditions and a preliminary understanding of your potential investment, what you potentially think are good ideas for your region and why. Look, this is pretty simple. We want to know what you think about your region and what you plan on doing about it. In the event you can use these planning grants to build out your ideas. We do not expect things to be fully baked here. It's a planning grant. It's a true blue planning grant. We just want to know where your starting condition and that you've got an opinion on your region and what's needed there. Evaluation criteria 2 is the potential proposed uses of the strategy development grant. What are you going to use the money for? Will that help move the ball down the field and get your region in a place in future iterations of this competition in a better position to be competitive for those large-scale implementation dollars? Third, organizational leadership and capacity. This is just always important. Do you have the right folks around the table? Do we think the team can use these planning grants to its highest and best use? And then finally, what's the budget look like? Do we think it's feasible and appropriate uses of resources? Those types of things. So we hope for these planning grants, this is not a Herculean task, and it makes sense for communities what they're being asked to signal to us in their short proposal. Okay, so now let's get into recompete plans. And again, no funding associated with this, but this is the vehicle by which communities get into that phase 2. There are 6 criteria, and I'm going to walk through each one of them individually. because we put in a lot of thought to these, and we want to make sure we don't hide the ball and people completely understand what we're looking for. The first three are worth 15. The second three are worth 9 each, signaling relative importance. So let's begin. So the first one is regional conditions and needs. So this really asks the question, what are the needs? What is driving the prime age employment gap in your community? What others? We know that it's the prime age employment gap is high. We've collected that data, but tell us why. Qualitatively, quantitatively, tell your story. We want to understand that you understand the conditions contributing to regional distress, and we want to know what those barriers are. What do they look like? And what are the types of people that are experiencing them? This is your opportunity to exhibit sort of the contextual nature of your community and what you're trying to accomplish. So really, do you understand those root causes? So if evaluation criteria is understanding those causes, evaluation criteria 2 is, do you have a strategy to address them? Again, this is the first phase of the competition. We do not expect all your investment ideas to be fully baked. We do not expect them not to change over the second phase, but we do want to have a sense for what interventions are needed. Please identify these, and we provided a high-level planned budget narrative. Again, it doesn't need to go into great detail here. We just want to get a very sort of, almost even a back of the envelope understanding of how you would use implementation dollars. Those could change in phase 2. We recognize that, and we provided a template to hopefully make it easy. And why did you prioritize? Why these investments? One of the questions I like to ask is what didn't make the list, right? You don't necessarily need to tell us what didn't make the list, but it's an inadvertent way of saying why these, why EDA funding, why now? In Build Back Better, one of the most important questions we asked when we reviewed an application is the but for. Like, why are these resources so essential? And that can be catalytic to, in this case, a highly distressed community now. And then let us know if there's any, give us confidence, whether that's research experience from the field that you've experienced, but give us confidence that these interventions make sense and that you understand them. The third is equity, inclusion, and diversity. This is the number one investment criteria across EDA. And for this competition, I like to say, if this competition's a fish, equity, inclusion, and diversity is water. It is the thing that this competition was created for. So that doesn't just mean what area is being served. It means is the benefits being shared equitably across the population in the service area. That should go without saying. But it also means how are the communities engaged? What does the leadership team look like that are actually receiving our resources? Similarly, what are the organizations and stakeholders engaged, and how well do they understand and reflect the communities in which they're working? And then how will you hold yourself accountable for thinking about equity over the duration of this grant? One thing I want to say about equity here is that we recognize in order to meet our equity goals, and as an extension, you all to meet your equity goals, that often may mean organizations are part of your coalitions. They may be leads, they may be sole applicant that have never received an EDA grant before, never may have received a federal grant before. That's perfectly appropriate. The measurement is not how many grants you've received in the past. The measurement is whether or not you can produce discernible impact in the communities you're in. So we do encourage you think about broadly about what it means to be equitable. Regional assets. So this is really important to us because while everyone who's eligible for this competition represents a highly distressed community, EDA takes an assets-based approach to this work. We believe every community has assets. Sometimes those aren't financial. Sometimes they may be industrial or local leadership, educational institutions, phenomenal nonprofits, or people who just really care and are good at what they do. Or maybe it's ideas on how you want to do investments. So we want to know about what you're bringing to the table, your regional assets. This is your time to brag. This is the point in the application where you're not just articulating why there's need, but why you are the right team and this is the right place and the right time to make change in your community. Targeted geographic approach. This is really important because it looks a little different than what you may have seen in other NOFOs or other competitions. So look, this is a place-based competition. We care about the place. We care about the service area you've picked. We want to know why you picked it. How are people in those areas benefiting? A statistic that really sticks in the back of my mind in this competition is out of every 10 new jobs created in a community on average, only 2 go to an unemployed individual who lives in that community. So this is the opportunity for you to show you're going to change that these jobs are going to be accrued and the benefits accrued in the service area and why the service area is logical. And then finally, partnerships and potential commitments. We'll talk about a little bit about this later. Really do look at our website. We're going to be providing a lot of supplemental guidance on what it means to be a good commitment, what it looks like. But here, look, every community has different assets. That means every community has different opportunities for commitments and partnerships, and we recognize that. But we do think if we're going to be making $20 to $50 million awards, it's reasonable for you to bring to the table lots of different actors. And that doesn't always, again, commitments are not always financial. I should say there is no match requirement in this competition. There's no match requirement. But here we do expect, and again, this will be primarily a competitive feature in phase 2, but we want to make sure people are beginning to think about it. I should say, like, gone are the days when EDA is interested in 150 generic form letters from different regional partners. That's just like work that doesn't reflect value. So really do focus, like, who are the partners you really want to engage, and use this evaluation criteria as an opportunity as a license to hunt, to go to your municipality, your state government. Lest we forget, there are many distressed communities in this country that exist in states with significant surpluses. So there's lots of different opportunities to think through this, and we'll provide guidance multiple ways, but do begin thinking about this. So I want to shift gears very quickly, and then I want to make sure we have time for questions. So you'll notice in this competition, actually you'll notice in all our large national competitions that we call out an individual, right? So in the Build Back Better program, we had what was called the Regional Economic Competitiveness Officer. In the Tech Hubs program, we have something called the Regional Innovation Officer. And in this program, we have something called the Recompete Plan Coordinator. So it's pretty clear we have a theory of the case. We have an opinion that leadership really, really matters. And we want to incentivize through all our large competitions that you bring people into the fold. Also, leadership is a great way to express your values in terms of diversity and inclusion. Again, you don't need to have this person hired in phase 1. You can use EDA implementation or planning dollars to hire this person. We want to just know that you don't have to identify who they are. We just want to make sure that you understand this is a critical role. And if you want to use your phase 1 application to signal the types of people you're looking for, the types of requirements, or if you do have somebody, let us know. I think those are things that give us confidence that you understand that leadership and talent is king, and you begin thinking about what that looks like. And then again, we talked a little bit about commitments, so I won't reiterate this too much. But here, really, these should really be contextual. When you think about what you're bringing stakeholders to the table here, think about really what you need. This is an opportunity, use this large competition as a vehicle to pull actors to the table and get them to bring things with them. Again, every community is going to look different. Nobody who doesn't have lots of philanthropic capital is going to be expected to bring it or anything like that. But this is an opportunity. 2, we encourage boldness and creativity. Right? This is an opportunity to really, just as our awards can be extraordinarily flexible and fund a huge variety of activities, you should think about here from a flexibility and perspective here. Again, this could be everything from having a couple companies say, maybe we'll consider dropping a degree requirement on a particular occupation and do skill-based hiring. Or maybe a local government says, or a local Health and Human Services agency say, anyone who's trained in EDA-funded training, if we will identify if they're eligible for public benefits, and if they are eligible, we'll go to work to make sure they get them. Again, think about quality over quantity here. But again, this is mostly a phase 2 for those buttoned-up commitments, but it takes time to build these, to begin kind of thinking about these throughout this competition and signaling where you can in some of those letters of support. So please do, I just want to end with a note that this is oftentimes I found that like communities that are extremely distressed or haven't historically won things like this say that like 20 to 50 million dollar competition, like individual awards of 20 to 50 million are just too large. We're not going to be competitive. Like that's the exact community this competition was built for. It is for you. This competition is for you. So we encourage you to get the word out. We encourage you to begin talking to those eligible entities. First thing you got to do is take a look at that map. Second thing is get on our website. We've tried to make this as simple and clear-cut a process as possible. We've got sort of an internal goal of using plain English so we can communicate these things well. But we've structured these two-phase competitions to make phase one relatively light. Nothing working in the federal government is completely light. We recognize that. But so like everyone who's eligible and this competition is meant for can throw their hat in. Finally, if you have any questions, please do send them to your regional office or contact our team up here at headquarters at recompete@eda.gov. That is not a dusty government website that nobody ever gets on or checks. It is used every single day. And there's a team that reads it. They funnel up policy and other things to us at leadership. So please do reach out to that. We will get back to you. But thank you. We're really thrilled to kick off this competition. We think it can make a truly discernible impact in some communities of need. And with that, let me stop sharing. And Ryan, let's dive into some questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. And thank you to all the participants for being patient with me as I field these questions. They're great. Some of them I do not know the answers to, but that's what Scott is here to answer. So Michelle asked, can you please clarify the following statement from the NOFO? Thus, applicants, including lead members of a coalition, must demonstrate that they are authorized to represent and act on behalf of the eligible geographic area. How does an applicant show this?
Yeah, so this is an example that's a little more legally jargony than I would like, but like it's simpler than you think. What we want here, and this is also, I should say this is language from the statute. So this is what we're looking for here is tell us that you're going to benefit, that you are actually benefiting that community, right? Because it is perfectly fine for an applicant to not be in an eligible area so long as they're benefiting the eligible area. So really what this says is like the word authorized is a little misleading, like somebody has like anointed you to represent an area. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about here is that like you're really benefiting that area and you can make that clear throughout your application.
Great, thank you. Carmen asked, can you create jobs through entrepreneurship or self-employment?
100%, absolutely. And I think like that's I would just say like depends on what your community looks like, depends on what your strategy is. But 100%, this is not explicitly a workforce development training program. We will do a lot of training in it, but there's lots of other things that can lead to job creation or job connection in a community. We encourage you to be creative and holistic.
Great. Garen asked, when you say a nonprofit is eligible in cooperation with a political subdivision, what does cooperation mean in this context? Also, does a public higher education institution count?
Yes. So higher education institution does count. Cooperation, particularly in phase one, is fairly light touch. A letter of support is sufficient. Other elements, we want to make sure that you all are in partnership. You do not need an extraordinarily beefy MOU. Again, partnerships is an evaluation criteria, so we want to know the coalition. If you're submitting on behalf of a coalition, know how to work together. But the way to meet this eligibility requirement, there's lots of ways of doing it. A letter might be one, members of the coalition might be another. It does not need to be a high threshold. You're not going to get thrown out if you don't have a 10-page letter of 20 years of partnership.
Great. Natalie asked, when will awards for phase one be announced?
So we will be announcing them the same time we announce the phase two NOFO. So that'll be this winter. So it'll close October. Oh gosh, I forget the number. Whatever it is, higher up in the slide, I believe it's October 5th. Then we will be announcing once we've done our evaluation. So I'll look for it this year. So winter.
Great. Adelaide asked, when discussing community, are we referring to the local area or the entire region as a whole?
So in order to be eligible, you have to signal to us what your eligible area is. So you can submit a map. There's a form you can use, a template that should be super easy to do. We just need to ensure the work is located in an eligible area. That's a bright line. Everyone needs to get over to participate. What's really important is then where's the work getting done? That's your question, service area. And again, that's completely up to you. As long as it's in an eligible area, it can be a series of neighborhoods, a series of towns, one town, many towns. Yeah, really up to you. That geographic decision making, that fourth evaluation criteria is a competitiveness factor. So that really is up to you.
Elizabeth asked, does tribal land include land in fee owned by the tribe?
So all tribal lands qualify for this program. So that is a bright line that we have articulated, and all tribal lands should be on the map. So yes, all tribal lands qualify for this program. If that didn't answer your question directly, please shoot it to the inbox so we can make sure we're getting a more specific answer if that didn't answer. But tribal lands qualify through the local labor market provision.
Elaine asked, what are examples of kinds of projects you expect to fund?
So a whole variety. I want to just reiterate, like, flexibility is a core element of this program. So like using our examples as a roadmap to what your examples should be might not be a great strategy. But I will say we've got, I think they're either online or they'll be on very soon. So there's in this deck, there's some examples. There's examples in the NOFO. And then we even wrote just some made up, like full recompete, sort of like theories of the case with programs and commitments. That's going to be in the supplemental portion of our website very, very soon. So you should have, there's a couple of examples. You should have enough there to really get a sense for, while you should choose whatever projects and investments make sense, how they all should come together as a whole.
Great. We also have a question from Sherry. Is there a way to drill down on the prime age employment gap data? Our county is a yellow eligible county, but is in a region with 2 other counties. I would like to know what our county's PAG is.
So if you're yellow and you hover over it, you should be able to see data on the prime age employment gap for an eligible area. We were not able to provide that for everywhere in the country, so you have to calculate that yourself. Which I mean, the good news is it's all publicly available data on the census. The bad news is you would need somebody who kind of knows how to do this a little bit. I think my recommendation, because we use the most up-to-date data, this data is publicly available. It's, if you see that you are ineligible, you are absolutely allowed to submit your own data to try to justify your eligibility. That is a permissible thing in this competition. And if you think that's the case, please do so. But as I would say, we use the same data that you're likely to use, which is all publicly available on the site.
Great. Shaquille asked, can you give an example of what we mean by collaborating with the officials of a public subdivision of a state? Would a county supervisor or state assembly member's office qualify as such?
Yep, those would. Again, I think there's lots of different ways to justify coordination. We do not specifically have like a list of things that check that box. Letters, I would recommend a letter and other things for them, part of a coordinated party. As there's going to be 3 to 8 roughly projects in each application. Again, roughly, you might imagine one of those is in partnership with a municipality or whatnot. There's lots of ways of doing it. There's no bright line. That's just a statutory requirement.
Nathaniel asked, are 501c3 organizations acting as employers considered eligible or appropriate for the reception of technical assistance services and or potential award dollars as either partners, as sub-awardees or contractors, or as the primary benefactors?
I mean, if you're a 501c3, yes, you're an eligible entity for this program. And I think if you have specific use cases, I would highly recommend sending those to the inbox, recompete@eda.gov, and we'll get back to you. But yes, 501c3s are eligible.
Alyssa asked, can an eligible area with a county that is not contiguous band together to apply?
Yeah, yes, you can. So you could have it, and this question comes up a lot. So in the last, we just did a call with state and local elected officials, and somebody pointed out a very large city that has two groupings of census tracts that are different parts of the city, and they want to put in one application for both of them. That's fine. I will, you absolutely can do that. I will just reiterate that the geographic decision making and where your service area is a competitiveness factor. So we just encourage you to think about it. Like you should have just be able to justify why you're doing what you're doing, and it makes sense. Our opinion is too often economic development becomes kind of a spreading of the peanut butter game, where again we want to see discernible impact, and if resources are spread too thin, that becomes difficult. So just keep that in mind.
Michael asked, is housing considered a wraparound service or needs service to recruit for job connection?
So we are still making a policy decision on housing and where we will land on that. We will be putting an FAQ and we'll highlight that very, very soon, within the next week. So that is still a policy consideration for this program. As of now, if you don't see an FAQ on something that's not allowed, considered allowable, we're going to be, but that's a sort of a particular unique case that we're actively having a conversation about.
William asked, how does this Recompete interact with the Tech Hubs program? Can an applicant consortium apply for both, or is no double funding for the same thing allowed?
No, they're different programs. Obviously, EDA is running both of them, but they're different programs, and I will say, it's like they're very, very different. They're probably as different as one could imagine in terms of the types of features of these two places. So it would be probably tough to consider an applicant being the exact same for both, but you could imagine regions that have Tech Hubs assets and yet they also have significant distress. And I think that's perfectly appropriate and fine. There won't be some sort of ruling that we couldn't do both. I will say we have very limited funding given the size of awards we want to make in both programs. And geographic distribution is a selection factor for both, but there's no rule against that. Absolutely not. If you think you have a community that meets the needs of this program, I would encourage you to apply. That's what I would say.
Awesome. And there are a lot of great questions still in the chat, but we have hit the end of this presentation. So I encourage folks to look at the Notice of Funding Opportunity and the Frequently Asked Questions on EDA's website if we didn't get a chance to get to your question.
Yeah, and I'm just scanning through these. For what it's worth, almost all of these are in FAQs. This presentation will be posted, as CJ said, by next week. And then if anything's not in there, but again, first thing I would do, sounds obvious, please do read the NOFO. We tried hard to make it clear in that document.
And then very quickly, Scott, a few folks have asked what email is good to send questions to. Recompete@eda.gov.
All right. Well, if there aren't any other questions, I appreciate everyone's time and have a wonderful Friday and rest of your day. And we hope you all apply to this exciting opportunity. Thanks.